from broadcast to baptism.
It's a very important conversation for us to have this morning. And not only are we doing it directly on our radio platform, but also on our social media accounts. So you can go and check out either YouTube or Facebook. The SID Media we are live from there, and you can follow this conversation right there. We are speaking about we're revisiting it really a conversation that we have had before. Fatherlessness is an issue. It is the duty of parents to take care and nurture their children. That unfortunately doesn't always happen. The absence of any parent is dire. It's a cause for concern, and I'm excited to be joined by author Onkabetse Rethabile Masobe for this one. Rethabile, I know you wrote Daddy Issues, and I don't know if there are others that you might have written. Good morning to you. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation.
Good morning, Millicent. Good morning, everyone. Well, firstly, thank you so much for having me and for the invite. And no, I haven't written anything just as yet. A part 2 is hopefully going to land at some point. I'm not even going to put a time down to not lie, but I'm hoping a part 2 does land. But so far, all we have is all we see, just the daddy issue part 1 from the daughter's perspective.
Oh, lovely. Part 2 would be amazing. And like what you're saying, maybe this time from the male perspective as well, to hear how the guys feel about not having a dad. It's very easy to say, I mean, I don't care. I can't hope to have someone who I don't even know. I don't know what it's like. So, yafana. But these things still have a way of hurting us regardless. And maybe, that's where I'd like us to start. Whether there is actually a difference between, a man fathering a son and a man fathering a daughter. Are there differences?
Okay, I think I'll probably just answer about, well, I grew up an only child, so I can't really speak from experience as to whether it was displayed differently in my own experience. But from just observation, they did tend to be quite a difference between how a daughter was treated versus a son, because I think a lot of parenting is based on the responsibility of, I'm essentially in charge of how you become.
Yeah.
But then I think, just thinking about the whole concept and from the book and from people's experiences and from discussions, I think what people need as children, because at least I can speak from that perspective, is just someone playing the role they need to play, whether it's mothering or fathering, as just being a father or mother, but not necessarily because of my gender, because wouldn't we need the same mother or father whether I was a boy or girl? And also, if we're in the same household, how would being treated differently from the same person be received by the child? Because I guess before 16, you're not going to really realize, oh, you're molding me. You're just going to see differences in how we're being treated. And also, the whole concept of what's a mother meant to bring? What's a father meant to bring? And if you're doing it differently to different genders, isn't that also going to obscure how it is received and most importantly manifests?
Yeah. Very, very important. Because a lot of time there are those subtle differences in how I think a lot of parents raise their children, especially conservative parents, the gender roles, and then how you apply love and what you call fairness and all that stuff does kind of for a lot of times, looking back at maybe my own experiences, but also hearing other people's experiences, I think they make a distinction. A lot of people talk about parenthood. A lot of people are positive about what it means to be a parent. A lot of people are very proud to have children. And there are men who are proud to be fathers too. Very proud to be fathers. Very, very proud. Why do we assume, I don't know if maybe we assume that when the dad, because we're talking about fathers in particular, is not present, you as a child, you're missing out. Okay. But what could he be missing out too by not being part of his children's lives?
Oh, I guess you're missing out on a life you created and the opportunity, as much as it's also responsibility. I think parenting as someone who wants to be a parent someday, so I'm just going to speak about what I think it would look like. Also understanding, like, you kind of parent for the first time, and you're also living your life for the first time, and things change with each generation. So I do
Mm.
understand how difficult it must be over time across the generations. But I think as much as it's a responsibility, you have the opportunity to craft a human being who could make like the biggest difference, whether it's in like a worldwide, or even like in the biggest smallest way. Like, you were part of someone who was the biggest blessing to the family, because the family needed someone that you birthed and like helped in crafting. And I suppose if we're going to bring it back to the Bible, when they speak about like God the Father, and how parents essentially are also somewhat of like the people who are meant to craft you in the world. So they might have not necessarily crafted exactly like how you look, because that like we give to God, but they do have the responsibility on behalf of God to craft the person you become.
Yeah.
And yes, that is a big responsibility, but I think it's also a beautiful opportunity if you take it with both hands and try. I mean, yes, you can't confirm what's going to happen at the end of the day and how the child's going to choose to become, but I think the opportunity and even potential positive outcome, and even if it's not positive, I think just trying and knowing you tried your best is the most you can ask of anyone. And I suppose the privilege
Mm.
that comes with it, especially if it is a positive outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. As you're speaking there, I'm thinking about how in our young lives that we've lived so far, memories are everything, like small things, that nostalgia when you hear a song from your childhood and you're like, oh my gosh, there are feelings that come. Sometimes people call it, sometimes we call it deja vu. Maybe it's a scent, a smell that reminds you of, man, I remember in grade one, I that smell, it sounds so, you know life is about memories, whether it makes you cry, whether it makes you smile and happy. And I feel like that's something else that we miss out. You see it with our relationships, no matter, I don't know, maybe people who tend to be surrounded by children see it very easily, how you crafting memories and a generation. And there's so much beauty in that. There are moments when I'm sure your children can be annoying. We probably were very annoying sometimes, but regardless of that, there's also a lot of good that comes out of it. And when you spoke about God being the Father, I'm like, girl, maybe that's one of the reasons why some people don't want anything to do with religion, with faith, with God sometimes. Because if God is a man and you're thinking, okay, the man in my life, the first one who I was supposed to know and be loved by, went AWOL. So it's like, if God must be bad. I mean, if he was so terrible, how do I don't know if you have been able to reconcile those issues and not see God, not project on God what the male figure should have done but didn't.
I think for me, like when I was 21, I asked for like a creative journaling Bible so I could actually
Mm,
write in the Bible. And I think the beautiful thing about
mm,
doing that, I ended up reading the Bible like I'd read any other novel, as like a story. And
mm,
not by rushing the process. And I mean, because the Bible's the Bible, the word is as it should be. It's going to be unchanged over time. And I was able to then reconcile, like,
nice.
religion against spirituality. And now
Okay.
by going straight to the word itself, I now was able to kind of see God as he was displayed in the Bible, and not what I was told he is and should be. Whether it's in the Old Testament, where they're like, God is full of so much wrath. And I'm like, that
Mm,
is true. But in all his anger, there was always love. I mean, even in all his pain, he'd be like, please repent. Can you please see the wrong in what you're doing? Because I don't want the consequence that you should have to take place. And, and just like the
mm,
beauty of realizing that throughout the scriptures, even for like, worst case scenario. So
yeah.
I think that was just beautiful, realizing how there was always love, even in like, God's anger. So I think it was easy to kind of see God as God before then also seeing like my Heavenly Father as like the human he is, and also how the roles kind of correlate, but not really, but should, but also understanding of human nature. And everyone's just figuring life out as it is. And
Mm-hmm.
just to like take a step back to when you're speaking about memories, and also the
Yeah,
question before about, you know, the responsibility of opportunity of parenting. I think
yeah.
it's really beautiful how, I think that's like the responsibility of a parent. I think we put too much pressure on how someone turns out instead of just the journey of these little moments that equate to how they turn.
Mm,
I
good
feel like it
point.
would probably become a little less stressful if we just looked at it as moments. Like, what am I going to do
Mm.
when I was pulling a tantrum? Like, how do I want them to see, you know, being reprimanded? How do I want them to see showing up?
Um,
How do I want them to see like going through really a time that makes them really sad? How do I react when they're really happy? Because I think like
mm,
all these little things build a bigger puzzle, but we're so consumed as to, oh my gosh, how you become is on me. We miss the opportunity in the journey to it at times. So
mm.
concerned, or just, I suppose, not even concerned, overwhelmed by the bigger picture.
Yeah, that's such a good point. You had me thinking about how there are people who are using social media in a very positive way. I mean, some maybe not, but I don't know if maybe you're struggling with how to parent better or something. Look at how there are people who, I mean, I'm sure there's both good and bad that we can talk about these things, who show their lives, their daily lives, and their children, on social media. For us who maybe just it's content that we eat, it's cute and it's like, oh, teaching the kids respect, how to say thank you, how to be grateful, stuff like that. Of course, there are those who show kids learning how to swear and being violent. That's very unfortunate. But there are also those other moments that make you feel like, oh, this is so adorable. And I just I don't understand how someone could be comfortable with knowing that my seed is out there in the world and I can live my next, I don't know, 60 years without a care in the world. I struggle with that. I'm not gonna lie.
I don't know. I think it's also, as much as it's generational, everyone also had what they went through. And we've seen, like, I mean, we can speak for, like, the focus of the book being on, like, you know, the non white South Africans. And
Mm-hmm.
how, I mean, if we go through, like, the past 3 generations, we go from colonization to apartheid to post apartheid. But then, yes, as much as we have access, the systems remain unchanged. So now it was navigating also the pressure of being the first person to be able to experience a form of privilege and access that no one else could. But then you had to be supported by people who could have even imagined that taking place. And then
Mm-hmm.
now we can come down to like us, where it feels like apartheid was like ages ago, where no, some of us were like literally born shortly after like it just concluded. Like, I'm just gonna put in inverted commas, because I mean to this day we can still see the pending issues, like we can call it remnants, the remnants of
Mm-hmm.
those decisions and issues that went by. And outside the experience itself, there was also how it like how people felt because of it, but then also having the responsibility of being yourself, navigating life while also having to raise someone in the same life, as much as they might have a somewhat different experience. And then it ends up creating all these different bridges of all of us from the same lineage existing at the same time, but having different experiences. But then we're living in, like, we're in one experience, so also our experiences impact each other. So basically I'm getting to the level of grace and understanding needed for how someone's experience of their own could maybe potentially negatively impact another person's.
Very
And
deep.
sometimes they don't know better, and sometimes they do know better, but don't know how to react better because their
Hmm.
nervous systems themselves don't know it. And I think that's like a big part of the book.
Mhm.
As much as it seems like, why are you attacking? It's more of, I think we just need to face the reality of how all our experiences impacted us and how that then impacted how we relate with each other. And then from their impacts, how we are going to continue relating and impacting each other to hopefully getting to a point where we can align with what better looks like. It might not be the best scenario, but
Hmm.
hopefully it could be better for all of us, because also because of the different experiences and, like, you know, opportunities and heartaches each generation went through. better looks different for each one. Like for a lot of our parents, perhaps they're like, you guys can go to any school and university and have any job you want. And that is better. But then maybe for like the younger generations, it's like, but that's what if it doesn't make me happy? So how does that look better for me if I'm in a space you're claiming is better, but it's sucking the life out of me?
Mm.
And I suppose we can like bring the Bible in where we have the Old and the New Testament, where in the Old Testament, better was actions come with consequences and the importance of repenting in order to, take down the consequence a little bit. But then in the New Testament, better is grace on whether I sin or not. I know, like, my sin's been paid for and grace is eternal. But then if you speak to people from both testaments, they're going to be like, what? It doesn't work that way. But then that's what it that's what it looked like for each one. But I think what we tend to do is just project how we feel and what we've experienced. But I've seen over time, and especially with like, the millennial parents trying to bridge the gap of just understanding how do you see life and also us acknowledging how smart a child is from a really young age. So bringing them into the experience of themselves being raised, just so you can
Mm.
try like, show cost benefit, right, wrong. Okay, I see you, but okay, I catch your personality, but instead of being like, you have to.
Mm. Mm. That's a marked difference right there, man.
Yeah.
Sure, she's taking me through a very hectic thought process right now. Her name is Onkabetse Rethabile Masobe, and we're having a conversation about despite and in fatherlessness, finding healing through that. Yo, Rethabile, the way you just navigated that, you had me thinking. So essentially, I feel grace is important. It's about like changing your mindset, given the opportunity to have a different perspective, allowing that other perspective to also be part of your thought process so that you don't die within because of things you can't change. Um, and you just see the reality for what it is, but with grace for the other person. Like, I love that narration of, the journey from colonialism and then you get into apartheid and then out of apartheid here it ends and then you've got children and you're trying to find yourself in that and there are those who've got no choice, the women primarily, because you birthed this person, you probably already have a little bit of an attachment. If you don't have an attachment, you would be embarrassed to just dump them. And so you take this person on and you raise them, but the other one who appears to have options, because I'm trying to understand myself, I'm trying to figure life out, whatever, as if she's not doing the same,
I think it's also a
disappears.
systemic issue because why is it like, even if you look at like the legal system that's supposed to, I suppose, like, but things are changing. But let's go back a few years ago where why is maternity leave like 3 months and there was never paternity leave in the past?
Before, yeah,
See, little things like that. Why
yeah.
is it when a woman says she wants a family or starts birthing a family, she's expected less of in the workplace, despite us knowing we have an economy where you kind of need two people working now. But then the
Mm.
woman's expected to start slacking a bit more, but the man's expected to shop even more to provide. So do you see how the even showing up more means you need to take away from something to show up somewhere else because you can't split yourselves?
Mm.
So then it also became like kind of a systemic and social issue that also further hindered this whole healing of like the family dynamic post all these other experiences that essentially tainted and broke it for the most part. So do you see why we need like a grace even across different levels of understanding?
Love that. And I want to invite you to weigh in on the conversation with all these complexities of perspectives that we're talking about this morning. Our WhatsApp number is +27734703520. What are your thoughts on navigating this issue of finding healing in and despite of fatherlessness? So Ritabile, I wanna talk about this. A show in South Africa, very popular show, Kumbule Kaya. And on this show, people find their loved ones. Most of the time, it's a father who has gone missing. Most of the time, that's what it is. But it could be a sibling, it could be a mom, yeah, it could be a grandfather and aunts, whatever. But they go, or it could even be a child, yeah. And they go to the show, they get help, they tell them where last this person was seen or when last they saw them, what they were wearing, whatever they can remember, addresses and all. And then the show tracks these people down, and then they show the meeting on television. Always so teary. Very overwhelming to see people's experiences. Is it, and I know it's an opinion, but do you think it's a good thing for children in this case to go and pull, a kumbule kaya on their unknown fathers?
I'm just going to pull it back to the book, real quick to try and answer this. And considering how it walks through 9 different stories, meaning it's 9 different characters who all had different or similar-ish experiences,
And
but
these are
then
real
were
life experiences.
real life experiences and were all
Mm,
essentially different people. And I think from using that as a point of reference, you there's always this longing. And I suppose if I can also use like my own personal like thought process in terms of how I navigate anything, I always say I'd rather live with rejection than regret. Like whether it's even like a job or a hobby or just anything, I always say I'd rather live with rejection than regret,
I hear you.
because with regret you never really know like how it would have turned out. But if you get rejected by something, you tried and it wasn't meant to be.
Okay.
So I suppose with like a kumbule kaya type of situation, and I mean, if you look at every character in the book, there was always this longingness and wanting of a relationship.
Mm,
And
mm,
most of them had access to their fathers. But now the problem was the extent of access and like how close they could feel or be, or how important they could be for their fathers. Now imagine someone who knows there's a father, who knows what stories they were told about the father, whether it was good or bad, but it's kind of like this puzzle piece. And like, even worse, you probably look like that person.
mm.
So now there's also navigating this whole like, where does half of my DNA and certain characteristics come from? And like who are we to say how dare you go look for someone who didn't raise you? But then you don't know the gap the person had to exist in, or like the longing, that longing of feeling like there's something missing. And so I don't
Mm.
see a problem if someone has this longing and there's a platform like Kumbule Kaya where they can go try close that loop, because some of the time they're met with love and open arms and let's try this again. And at other times it was a how dare you find me? Like there was a reason I didn't want to. So, but like that's okay. Rather live with
Ouch.
rejection knowing you tried than wonder what life would have been like if you didn't find this person, or wonder how different like rather know your life was going to be completely indifferent and now you just have the scar of rejection,
Yeah,
then
that you not
think that this
deal with.
person would have done like made a complete difference in your life. Because I think also a big part of longing, we always long from a positive perspective, like how could you like make a good difference in my life, how could you
Mm,
make a bit more sense to provide a bit more ease and clarity to my existence. Because I really think I don't think we ever long for like worst case scenario. We we
yeah,
dread worst case scenario, but when there's longing, it's a
actually.
form of hope, which means there's goodness, like we're expecting to come out of whatever we're longing. And that's
Yeah.
Kumbule Kaya. So if you go and it's a terrible ending, at least you tried, and to continue without wondering,
Yeah.
and have that battle scar. And I think we should also not feel bad about doing what we thought was best, even if the outcome was terrible. But then if you do something and it turns out well, then we're glad we tried.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Did you say I'm just an inherent optimist? I always try to look at life from how could even the worst thing be received better? Because life is hard enough as it is. Look at the
For real.
economy, look at society, look at the news, look at the world.
It's bad. That is so true. And some of us are eternally pessimistic, which is also just a terrible way of
But
looking at
yeah,
life.
because of pessimism, I mean, but also pessimism comes from a form of reality of it's time for us to react accordingly to what we see, because clearly hope is just leaving us in this endless cycle of nothing changing. So I
Sounds like
get
a
it.
trauma response. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, it is a trauma response for. I mean, people
Mm.
wouldn't call it a trauma response. They're gonna call it a response to reality. But then optimism is also saying, I see the exact same reality, but I'm hoping for different a different outcome, because this is a very unpleasant reality we're living in, and if I just expect it to remain the same, I'm just gonna feel like, what's the point of existing, or what's the point of even hoping for better? Because clearly, better doesn't seem to be coming.
Sure. Almost like boiling down to then existential questions at the end of the day, which is why I think faith is such an important part of life. It gives you something to live for, something to worth dying for, some kind of purpose. When you don't, you know, if nothing is real and all of it is fake and whatever, at, I guess at least you would have lived with an honest for yourself way to try and have hope and something worth waking up for, as opposed to nothing at all. I don't know.
Yeah,
It's a
I
bit of a
think
tough one.
which Bible? It was somewhere in the Old Testament. I'm not going to say which one per se, because I mean there were similar themes throughout. But I think it might have been Judges or Exodus, or between the two,
Mm.
where they speak about, like, part of the reason God was so angered with the Israelites was because He not only gave them, like, a reason to believe He exists and wants better for them and for them to keep going, but then he'd always, like, well, comes to Judges, he'd always raise someone to show them that better does exist, better is coming, and
Mm.
sending someone to show you, like, you say you want evidence, here's evidence in someone, and might not feel like it's making much of a difference. I think we've also just been, we've lived such sensationalist lives that
Okay.
unless it's like a big dramatic event, I'm not going to believe it exists. And
Mm,
you
mm,
start
mm, mm, mm.
looking at these little details. I think there was
Yeah.
this poem that was like, I was waiting for an answer, like a verbal answer, but God spoke through me to me through a flower. So there's also, like, I mean, I'm speaking as an optimist, but also against, like, the concept of pessimism.
Yeah.
Of course, if you're looking at, like,
It's fair.
all that's going wrong, you're going to see all the wrongs. They literally call it the blue dot effect. If all you
Mm.
do is looking for the blue dots, all you're going to see are the blue dots, even when a different color enters, because your mind's been programmed to see that blue dot.
Mm,
But
mm,
then
mm.
us, you and I, polar opposites of the exact same reality. I'm gonna see the blue dot, but then I mean, you're like, oh wait, but purple just entered the chat. What does purple mean? So sometimes faith and even hope doesn't mean some new information is gonna be good, but it's just opening up to seeing something else. And whether that something else is going to be good or not that great, at least you're open to new info. And I mean, from a point of optimism and faith and hope, you hoping for, like, something good and always seeing the good. So if we grew up in the times of the judges and your understanding of what a judge is, I mean, if we look at Samson was literally Superman. If you look at, like, the details of the Bible, he
Pretty
was
much.
Superman. Every other judge was, like, the leader of the tribe that had to go fight war, but then, like, Samson was literally Superman. So if God could always, like, raise someone to show you the good that exists and all the bad, why can't we continue to see that today, where there's even, like you said, we have social media where there's two sides to it. There's the way we all had characteristics where there's two sides to it. There's a lot of us grew up under the same traumas of, like, fatherlessness and how hard life can be, and, like,
Yeah.
post-apartheid
Very
remnants. But
true.
we can also see how good life can be. And I think also about looking at how good life can be, and from a point of faith, sometimes we're not meant to see the promised land, but we're the stepping stone to what the promise is looking like and getting closer to it.
Ooh, girl. Do you write poetry?
I used to, like, when I was a teenager.
Yeah, no, you good.
But
You good.
but
Mm,
these
mm.
like that. So sometimes the promise is me knowing I'm a bit closer. And if I was in the time of Exodus, I saw the cloud during the day, I saw the fire at night, I saw there was a man who'd always go up to the mountain and speak to God and say what God said, and would see what was said, actually, like, would see it with our own eyes despite not being part of the conversation. But then I'd maybe, and I'm seeing there is God and things are getting better. And the fact that, like, we have manna, but we're in the middle of the desert, and we've been released from slavery. So I'm seeing how much better it can get, but I'm surrounded by nothingness. So I could also understand people who are like, we were brought out here to die, but there were so many things and things put into your journey to show you're not being brought out here to die. Yes, you might not see the promise, but there's evidence of getting closer to it. And maybe my job was just getting you closer to the promised land, but maybe my kids will see the promise.
Mm.
And I mean, even with, we can think about apartheid, some of the people who fought for us to be in the spaces we're in today did not get to enter those spaces, but they fought and got us closer. And I mean, even with us who might complain, like, has apartheid really ended? Because still, look at some of these policies, look at some of these structures, look at some of these systems. But the mere fact that I'm inside and can question it and, keep questioning is maybe my part of the journey of how I'm in what was once someone else's promise, but now my nervous system is showing me that no, the promise is incomplete. So we're still getting close.
But it's a dream
Yeah.
in
So I don't know.
fulfillment.
And I think we've also been raised to live for ourselves. And I think that's where the hard thing comes in. Like when we speak about generational wealth, a generation, especially from a wealth perspective, I get, like, how some people of color don't really say we have generational wealth because we think we're here, you do what you can do, and then next. But then if you look at the concept of generational wealth, I'm starting to build something, I'm bringing you into what I'm building to understand the importance of what we're building. So when I hand it over to you, you increase it. At church, a few months ago, the pastor was even speaking about legacy is what was once, like, so a parent stealing is the next generation's flaw. So do you see how
Whoa.
easily not see the getting closer to what the promise is, or what the promise is for that generation? Or maybe we should look at promises as generational and would be less consumed as to, God, you said I was going to be a billionaire. Like, I'm barely approaching 1 million. But the fact that you can even speak about approaching 1 million, where back in the days, like getting to 100 was a big deal. And I suppose
Yeah.
then, like, let's bring it back to the topic of fatherlessness. Yes, there's been generations of fatherlessness, and we understand why. But now the thing the book is questioning, and the reason we need these conversations, is not to make men feel terrible about what they've done, but it's to make them conscious about how certain decisions made and, like, outcomes of it still create well, for the most part, a negative impact, even if it looks good, but it creates a gap. And we're seeing the importance of why a father is needed in someone's life. And more importantly, the more I think about life and, like, a family unit, I understand the importance of why you need more than one person raising that person, two people created. I think it was very, I mean, everything in creation is intentional. God didn't say, oh, let me create flowers, but forget to have rain. Or let me create sunflowers, but make sure there's never sun. So I think there was also a reason where God said two become one, but the fact that they still end up two individuals in that one, or having to, like, take care. I mean, even at the beginning, God created Adam and Eve. And even with Adam, he said, you need a helper.
Yeah. Yeah. Two is always
So
better.
yeah, and I mean, creation was basically the first thing people had to parent. If I'm gonna, like, put it anything, and they needed to help each other to get to creation. So I think the topic now, when we speak of fatherlessness, we need to speak about the problems in it, how it's a really bad thing in terms of how it manifests in half of our lives and how we see life, but most importantly, how it challenges something God really sees as important, which is family. Because now a large part of us, we fear this concept of family and rather go create family and friendships we know we can just say never mind at some point in time,
It's
in the
not
ones
that deep.
yeah.
Yes.
And
Easy to
yeah,
walk away. Mm.
but because of, we've also seen walking away, and why we need to basically try see how to remedy the concept of what family is and how to fix things instead of the easy outs, and
Yeah.
also how to
Okay.
think that works for all the different equations. So, and I don't know, and I don't know if I think it's gonna need like 100 conversations, but also conversations get exhausting. So now it's also finding a practical way of how can we challenge fatherlessness in a way that's not going to create fear in people being fathers, but creating better fathers and those who are already fathers to want to do a better job in being a father and understanding the importance of reconciliation and trying again and being better.
Are there practical things that can be done?
I mean, step one is always a conversation, but like I said, the hard thing about conversations is we all see life differently and receive life differently. So I might be coming forward and I'm having a conversation like, Dad, I didn't like it when you thought you could be in and out of my life in pieces and shop for moments you thought were important when I needed you more in this way. So maybe that's me thinking I'm like creating a pathway of this is what I didn't like and this is how it's impacted me. And maybe I can be like, and now I'm hyper independent because, and I struggle to let people show up for me because you being someone I thought would be the first to always show up didn't. And
Mm-hmm.
now it's really have people show up. So do you see how like I might have even packaged it in like quite a rounded way just to like, release it from my system because maybe it's harbored resentment.
Yeah.
But then my dad might receive it as you're attacking me and you're saying I didn't do good enough when I tried. But maybe then he needs to react and but I was doing one, two, three, and then it ends up being a back and forth where it might feel like attacks because it's not nice feeling like you're wrong, especially with like a lot of us grew up in a school system where you had to fix the wrong instead of reflect on why the good was good. So maybe we
Mm.
need to also shift the whole understanding where someone was coming from, but then also understanding how where someone was coming from and why they reacted that way and behaved in a certain way, but then get to a middle path of, okay, well, this is how it's created our relationship now, and why there's a bit of a gap of like how we interact, how we're going to fix it, and also understanding I'm now an adult, you're also an adult, so I don't need you to father me the way you did back then. And I think another big part is understanding to parent and also child in phases. What I needed in preschool is not what I needed in primary school, which is not what I needed in high
Mm.
school, not what I needed in post matric, which is definitely not what I need when I get to a certain level of adulting. So I think there's also like a big part of having to adapt how we interact with each other, like from a parent child perspective over time.
Yeah, very beautiful advice. I love that. But what I think you are saying this morning, what I'm getting from you is it's worth making the effort to try and connect. Whether you will find healing because of that, I guess, not that you can't, but whether you will do it together with him, there's no guarantee. He might be willing, he might not be willing, and then that means you have to navigate healing in a different way without him because you can't force a person into relationship with you. Yeah.
You kind of
Parting shots?
did it because a few years ago in like an interview I had, I said, I mean, for myself, because someone actually did ask that question, like, how do I try fix this? And I always say it's really not like the child's responsibility to try mend like a relationship that was never theirs, that they didn't break in the first place. But we always need to think in worst case scenarios of like if something were to happen to that parent, would you be okay with how you reacted through your anger? Or would you rather know you tried and there was nothing more you could do? And yes, you'd be sad if the person were to pass on, but at least knowing you tried. But then if you
Yeah.
feel like trying is going to be worse for you, then I guess that's also okay. But you just need to be able to live with every decision you made and not let it harbor like an additional generational level of how now you react to your child if you
Mhm.
have, because then that's how it tends to manifest.
That's a problem. That's a problem. Sure. And hopefully we can all find healing. I think whether it's counselors that you find, therapists that you find, life coaches, books. Books are really amazing. I love them a lot.
With the people around you who grew up in similar times and you see the differences and similarities. And then I think with anything, the biggest part of like such a topic is you need to show yourself grace and forgive yourself for a situation you didn't put yourself in, because we also tend to think we had some part in how things played out,
Mm, and you didn't. You
and you
just
didn't.
didn't. Yeah, you're just a child. Sure. Rethabile, you're amazing. Thank you so much for being part of this conversation this morning. We wish you the best in all your endeavors and continue. Please get on to part 2. We want to hear also the male perspective. And I feel like this will be an ongoing storyline. There's millions of people who've got experiences to share, and everyone's story is important.
No, thank you so much. And I suppose my final remarks before I just drop off, it's what I say when I always tend to sign a book unless I'm making it a bit more personalized, which is I hope you learn to pour out because you deserve to feel lighter.
Oh, amen. Beautiful. That's why we leave it this morning with Onkabetse Rethabile Masobe joining us, healing in and despite our fatherlessness. Check it out.
Adventist World Radio.